Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's Bible study. And today in Bible study, we looked at Joshua chapter 24. And for those of you who were in Bible study last week, as we looked at the ending of Deuteronomy, you'll probably notice a little bit of similarity between these two. That's an important thing to notice because Joshua is, as I mentioned on Sunday, presented as a new Moses. And so just like Moses, when he's about to die, he wants to make sure the people know what they are getting themselves into, and that's what Joshua 24 is all about. So this is the covenant renewal at Shechem. Now, Shechem is a place that is pretty important because Shechem is the place where Abraham was promised by God that his descendants would be given the promised land. So Joshua, if you'll remember, enters with them entering the promised land. There's a bunch of fighting as they drive the Canaanites out and destroy the kind of the evil practices that are going on, and it ends with Joshua allotting the land and renewing the covenant. And this happens at Shechem, and it's not a mistake or a coincidence. This is an important point. They bring the ark because it says they did it before the Lord, and Joshua speaks to them, and he actually speaks as a prophet. So you'll notice in verse 2 it said Joshua to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel," and he speaks as the Lord, right? And so God speaks through him to the people. This is them making an agreement, and it goes through the story of the Old Testament with Exodus and then some of the book of Numbers and important stuff there. Things we've talked about, Balaam, right? This idea that God is so powerful, he even can use the enemies of Israel to fulfill his plans. And this is going to be important for the people to grasp because they are supposed to fear the Lord and the fear of God, right? It says this in verse 14. Now, therefore, this is Joshua speaking, right? Fear the Lord. And they're able to do that not because they're scared of him, but because they know of all the good things he's done for them in the past. So he brings up all the positive things that God has done, how he's given them the land, right? He points out that you didn't win it by your own sword. I gave it to you. An important theme in the book of Joshua, right? This is what I talked about on Sunday. Who fought the Battle of Jericho? God did. He won it. The Israelites were used as tools for his justice that he brings into the world. And so I think that that's an important thing to remember. Joshua here also points out that they have a choice. And the choice is the same choice, just to connect it again with my sermon, that we see given to, that Joshua says to the man, right? He says, do you fight for us or for our enemies? And he says, neither, right? Because it's God, right? He says, neither. I'm a commander of the Lord's army. And that's what the people are supposed to choose, right? Do you choose between the gods of your fathers who, worshipped over in Babylon, or the gods of the Egyptians, or do you follow the Lord? And of course, there's that famous line that you see in all the Christian mom houses, written in nice little line, nice little calligraphy. They sell it at Hobby Lobby and Amazon and all the other places, Christian bookstores, right? But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that is Joshua's point that he's making. He's saying this is what we are going to do, and that is what everyone else should do too. The idea here, though, when he brings these other groups up, is that they've been places that these people have abandoned or places that they have driven out. So it's kind of an ironic choice that Joshua is giving him. He's like, this shouldn't even be a choice for you. It should be obvious who you should serve. And they answer in the affirmative, right? What do they say? They say, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord. And they say, we're going to do that. We're going to serve the Lord. And then Joshua begins to speak kind of prophetically about what is going to happen. He says, you are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. Jealous, again, not a very good translation into English. Very good at the time of the King James, which is kind of when it became established in English that this is a translation. Jealous in the Hebrew does not imply kind of the envy that jealousy does for us. When we think of someone as jealous, we think they're envious. In the Hebrew, it is a lot more of a, you are rightfully owed something. So, we would not say that someone who is promised to be paid a certain amount and doesn't get paid that amount, that they're jealous for that money, right? That's not what we would say. We would say they have right to the money, right? So that is what God is communicating, right? He has a right to them because they are signing this agreement. And so Joshua says, because he is like that, if you break this, he will bring divine punishment upon you, right? He will bring justice upon you. And the people said, right, we will serve him and we will obey him. So they make the covenant. This is another covenant made. That's how God likes to present himself to people, both in the Old and New Testament, is through the making of covenants. And Joshua sets up a stone that's going to be a witness. This is a metaphorical idea here, right? That the stone isn't not actually going to speak, but the idea is like we're raising this to show that if you break it, you can look at this and you can remember that you made the covenant. So you don't get to be angry at God for holding you accountable. And so it ends with him sending the people away. It says, every man to his inheritance. And before we get to the end with Joshua's death, I do actually want to talk about something important. If you go to the end of Judges, which is the book we're going to be looking at this coming week, this is how the book of Judges ends, except it's done after doing something awful. And that is not a coincidence either. This is definitely linked through authors with the book of Judges. And they're showing a connection, right? The people here make a promise, and the book of Judges ends with them doing something awful and kind of doing it and ending it with this word to draw the connection. They made this promise, but the people of Israel are not following through with what they said they would do. So just an important thing to note there. And then it ends with Joshua's death and his burial. He dies at the same age as Joseph, a sign of blessing and long life and things like that God gives him. He's buried, though, and this is kind of an interesting way to save it. They said, and they buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah, which is on the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. Interesting thing there, right? There's lots of connections that are being drawn to show how God has fulfilled his promise. Abraham had to purchase the land where he was going to be buried. Joshua dies and is buried in the land that is his inheritance. So you see that the promise of God is fulfilled, even in the fact that Joshua is buried in the place where he should be, in his family's inheritance in the land that was promised. And then it says, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. And it talks about how the bones of Joseph are brought in from Egypt. And then finally, Eleazar dies and things like that happen. And then it moves us right into where Judges is going to take place, which is, okay, what happens after they've been living in the land? And that's what we're going to talk about next week. And spoiler alert, not great. So I hope you guys had a wonderful Wednesday. I hope this was interesting to you. And I will see you tomorrow for an episode of A New Thing. Peace out.